The Kuta Sichas Chelik Yutes, Tetze Gimel, Lili Nishmas Rabbi Yosef Binyamin Ben Reb Menashe Kaltman. This is a amazing Sicha. This comes from the Farbrengen of Shabbos Parshas Tetze, Yud Gimel Elul Tavshin Yud Daled. Yud Gimel Elul is the Yom HaNisuin, the wedding anniversary day of the Friedrich Rebbe. And this Farbrengen was mostly about the ideas of marriage. As a matter of fact, the famed Maimer L'cha Doidi, which is Chazer today by Chassanim at their Kabbalas Panim, is from this Farbrengen. In the Sikha that we're going to learn today, we're going to explore the concept of Kiddushay Kesef, of Kiddushin through money, as it is in Nigla the Torah, as it is in the Gemara and Halacha, and how it reflects in our relationship with the Eibishter and our marriage with Hashem. We will see two ways of serving Hashem, reflecting the two different ways that Kiddushay Kesef could work. Very, very enjoyable, very geschmack. It's not even so long, and looking forward. From the Psukim of Parsha Seinu and the Psukim in this week's Parsha, Ki yikach ish ishu u'ba'ala. This is the beginning of the mitzvah of get. But it begins with what happens before get. There has to be a marriage. So if a man takes a woman u'ba'ala and will have relations with her, the Goimar v'yatza, then she will leave. The Goimar v'yahaisa, then she will marry another person. From these psukim, Latin pen up that we learn in the Gemara in Kiddushin, as a isha niknis bekesef bishtaru babiyah. When a man and a woman get married, according to halacha, there is a kinyan, there is a transaction occurring. This is where the husband is taking ownership, so to speak, of the woman and of his obligations to her. There has to be a kinyan. So this kinyan takes place in one of three ways: bekesef, through money, by the man giving the woman money or something of financial value; bishtar, through him handing her a document in which he takes upon himself to marry her and the obligations towards her; ubabiyah, and through marital relations. Kasef learned up from ki yikach ish isha. The fact that you could use money is learned from the pasuk ki yikach ish isha. The word yikach in other places, specifically in Sdei Ephraim, when Avram buys a field from Ephraim, it says kesef hasada, nosati kesef hasada, kach mimeni, I gave you the money, take it from me. So we see that yikach means money. Fun uba'ala, from the fact that it says that he will be with her with marital relations. Let it up as niknis bebiyah. This teaches us that works for to create this kinyan. Un shtar, and the idea that you could use a shtar, learned from the yotz of Aisha, is learned from a pasuk. This pasuk, the yotz of Aisha, she will leave and she will be with another man. The pasuk compares the being with the second person, with a new person, to the leaving the first person. Just like when she leaves the first person, it's with a shtar, it's with a document, namely the get. So too, when she is to be with the next person, b'shtar, it happens through a shtar. So from this we learn that a shtar works for marriage. So kesef, shtar, and biyah. Even though, as we just said in this previous paragraph, that a woman could become mikudesha, she could become betrothed, the kinyan could be activated through any of these three ways. Von deswegen is noagu kol Yisrael lekadesh bekesef or b'shaveh kesef. The minhag, the widespread custom is that by Yidden is that they are mekadesh, they betroth their wives with money or with something of financial value. This is consistent with the fact that the first kinyan mentioned in the pasuk is money, like we just said, ki yikach. So therefore, it makes sense that the accepted form of kinyan, of kiddushin, is money. Now, since everything in Torah is precise, exact and precise, we will see that in the kiddushin through money, we can express, we can reflect the idea, the general concept of marriage, even more than it would be through shtar or through biyah, as we will now venture into the sikha to explain this idea, the connection between kiddushay kesef specifically and the idea of marriage in general. So in Siv Beis, we're going to, number one, bring another makar, another source in Torah for the idea that Kiddushin could happen through kesef, through money. And then we're going to introduce a Chakira of the Rogachover Goin in how the kesef works together with the Kiddushin. In the Gemara in Kiddushin as well, is Danach limud as a isha niknes bekesef. In addition to the limud of Kiyikach, there's another limud in the Gemara that a woman could be acquired through money. From V'yatzachinu and Kesef, from the pasuk V'yatzachinu and Kesef. This pasuk is in Chumash Shmois in Parshas Mishpatim, in the parsha about the Amma HaIvriya. The Amma HaIvriya says that the person can acquire, this is an Amma HaIvriya, a Jewish maidservant who is under the age of Bas Mitzvah, and therefore she is being acquired from her father. Says the pasuk that if the master, if the owner doesn't marry her, or his son doesn't marry her, then she will leave without any money. In other words, he has to give her back, and he cannot sell her to anybody else. So the Gemara learns, Ein kesef la'adin zeh, no money for this master. Aval yes kesef la'adin acher k'shiyetz mimenu umaniu av. But there's another master that does receive money for her when she leaves him, and who is that? The father. Which means when the father gives his daughter to be married to someone else, then that person does have to give money. So in this case where the person bought her and doesn't want to marry her, then he can't get any money for her. But if the father wants to give her away in marriage, then he does get money for her. So from this we see that, and obviously the reason for that is because she's a minor. If she was an adult, then she would get that money. So from this we see that money creates a kiddushin. That if someone wants to marry a woman, he gives her money, and through money she becomes mikudeshes. So we have the limit of kiyikach ish, where kiyikach is kicha. Kicha, it teaches us that you can acquire a woman through money. And then there is a pasuk v'yatzachinim en kesef, and also in kasef, which also the Gemara uses as a limud, that a woman could be acquired through money. Yes, leimar. As in the Geder from Kiddushin Kesef is Faran Achilek, that we could say that in the concept of Kiddushin through money there is a difference. Whether we're going to learn it from the pasuk of Kikach Ish Isha, Shebe Parsha Seine, which is in our parsha, other from the Yatzachinim and Kasef, or are we learning it from this pasuk in Parsha Mishpatim? Yatzachinim and Kasef, which pasuk we learn it from is actually going to create a relevance in how we learn it and how we apply it. Ubahaktim. And in order to understand this, first we have to introduce what's been a geya the kiddushay kesef kler the Rogachover. The fact that with regards to the kiddushin through money, the Rogachover explores the following debate: Im ha'ilahu akinyan. What is the cause and what is the effect? Is the cause here the kinyan, the acquiring of the money, v'al yedei zeh miskadeshes, and through that, through acquiring money, she becomes betrothed, she becomes married to her husband? Or do we say the opposite? The cause is the marriage. And through the marriage, she acquires the money or the object with which he is marrying her. Is the kiddushin activated because she acquired the money? Because, or do we say the opposite, that because she is married to him, she's betrothed to him, therefore she acquires and takes ownership of the money? The Rogachover brings proofs from the Gemara for both ways, and we're going to learn one proof for each way. First, we're going to learn a proof that the money is the first. The money is the cause, and through acquiring the money, she's able to become mikudeshes. My mistake. Sorry. The first raya is going to bring that ha'ilahi akidushin, that the kiddushin is first, and through the kiddushin, she is kind of the money. The din is as hoysai medes b'shus rabim. This is a Gemara in Gittin. If a person is standing in Shus Rabim, a woman was standing in Shus Rabim, and the Zarkei law, and he threw the get towards her. Now, if she's in her own Rishus HaYachid, So the fact that she's in her own space, in her own domain, that takes ownership of the get, and she's mekudeshes, and she's megudeshes. She's divorced. What happens if she's standing in a susarabim? So the place where she's standing can't take ownership for her. So the Gemara says, if he threw the get at her and it landed on the floor, karev law, if the get is closer to her than to him, migureshes, she's migureshes. She's divorced. Because since it's closer to her, it becomes hers more than it becomes his, and therefore she's migureshes. And the Gemara says the same thing would apply to kiddushin. That if a person throws a star of kiddushin in the susarabim to a woman, and it's karev law, it's closer to her, then she becomes mikudeshes. And the Rogatchover adds that according to the Rishonim, this doesn't apply just to star, that if he throws the star at her and it lands closer to her than to him, she's mikudeshes. Is the din azayich when it gets a kesef kiddushin. The same thing would apply that if he threw the money towards her, or a ring or something of value towards her, and it landed closer to her than to him, then she is mikudeshes. V'lecheira, v'bald sie hat noch nicht keine gewinnem kesef, warum sie redt sich nicht davkas, der kesef ist gefallen in ihre daladamis. Is wie azay wert sie mikudeshes. V'lecheira, we could ask, how does she become married? The money is not hers yet. She didn't take ownership of the money. It doesn't say that the money has to fall within her daladamis. If it was within her daladamis, within her own space, so the daladamis of the person is considered his own space, and it could be kaina for him. It could acquire for him. So if it was in her daladamis, then fine, you could say that the money landed in her daladamis, and therefore she's kaina the money, and because she's kaina the money, she's mikudeshes. But in the case of this Gemara, it's not necessarily within daladamis. So she has not yet halachically taken ownership of the money. So how does the kiddushin happen? Is there funaraya? Therefore, this is a proof as ha'ilaya kiddushin, that the cause over here is the kiddushin. That answers the question. How did she acquire the money? Because she became mikudeshes. When the person said that you're being mekudesh to me through this money, and he threw the money towards her, that was mekadesh her, and once she became mekudeshes, she takes ownership of the money. And that's why, even though the money lands in a place that is not automatically kaina for her, it's still, she's mekudeshes, and she keeps the money because she's mekudeshes. Liidach, conversely, brengt er echaraya zum ersten Neufen. The Rogatchover also brings a raya to the first approach as ha'ilah hu hakinyin, that the cause is the ownership of the money, and that causes the kiddushin. The Gemara sagt, as by kiddushin is teichidei dibur lav kidibur dami. Generally speaking, there's a concept of teichidei dibur kidibur dami, that if a person says something, and immediately within what is still considered him speaking, he says something else, it's because he's still speaking, he can override what he originally said. So a person says to someone, I'm going to sell you this, I'm going to give this to you, etc., etc. And then within a small amount of time, a very short amount of time, he says, I take it back. He takes it back because he's still speaking. It's not until he finishes speaking that the deal is done. So usually we say, if you're still speaking, it says anything you say right afterwards, it's as if you're still speaking. And you could retract what you originally said. But by kiddushin, we do not say that. It does not consider, it's not considered as if you're still speaking. And even within the few seconds of Teichid Dibur, you cannot retract kiddushin. So a person says, I'm just joking, it's too bad. It's mikudeshes. Is mefarish the Rashbam. So the Rashbam says, what kind of scenario is this? If a person was mekadosh nish in front of women, in front of edim, in front of witnesses, and then within the amount of time which is teichid dibur, he says, levu matana, let this money or this value that I just gave you be a matana. But it should not be a kiddushin, so he retracts the kiddushin. Ein shaymin, like we don't listen to him. Umekudeshes vein mekudeshes, and she's both mekudeshes and not mekudeshes. There are halachic complications here, because after all, the person doesn't want to be married to her, but she is still mikudeshes to a certain degree, because he cannot retract the kiddushin once he already did the kiddushin in front of Edom. Is nicht verstandig. So, and this Rashbam in the Gemara Baba Basra, Rashbam takes the place of Rashi. So we don't understand. Why does the Rashbam create such a unique scenario where he says that you can keep the money, but the money should be a gift and not a kiddushin? Why does the Rashbam not explain it very simply? As it is in ganzen chayze von der Sinnes hakesef and man zurück the Geld from the Risha, that the person retracts everything. He says, I want my money back. I don't want to get married. I don't want to know you. I don't want anything to do with you. Why does the Rashbam create this case where he says you could keep the money as a present? It just shouldn't be kiddushin. From the fact that the Rashbam gives us this unique scenario, this is a proof, as in a zafal, that the Rashbam holds that if it was such a case where he said, I want my money back also, then he could change his mind. Since in general, by all other scenarios, besides for Kiddushin, the halacha is that Teichid Dibur is considered like he's still speaking. A person could retract the gifting and the acquiring, the acquisition of the money. And then she won't be Mekudeshes. Because from acquiring money or giving money, you could retract within Kedei Dibur. So the fact that the Rashbam gives such a unique scenario will teach us that if the person said, I want the money back right away, then you have to give him the money back. Because by money, you say, Teich Kedei Dibur, Kedibur Dami. That when you're still speaking, you could retract what you just said, he could take the money back. And once he takes the money back, then for sure, she is not Mikudeshes. So had the Rashbam, had the scenario been that he said, I want everything back, then the halacha would be that Shaimin Loi. We do listen to him. That's why the Rashbam gives a unique case where when is it ain't Shaimin Loi? When do we not listen to him? That is in a case when he says you could keep the money, and it's only the Kiddushin that he wants to retract. Then we say ain't Shaimin Loi. Tavkiv and Zecharat is need for Naknoas HaKesef. Only when his regret is not from the money, from giving the money. Nor blois from the Kiddushin, it's only from the Kiddushin. Und in the Bailis from the Kesef machten it kein Shinui, as is Shaloisha al Matana, and he's not changing anything in the ownership of the money. The woman is keeping it as a present. Is that din as Ein Shemelei? Then you could say Ein Shemelei, well, from Kiddushin, because when it comes to Kiddushin, you cannot retract even Teichidei Dibur. So that's why the Rashbam gives you this specific scenario, because it is Dafke in that case where Ein Shaimin Loi, because he's letting her keep the money and not the Kiddushin. But if he wanted the money back, then it's Shaimin Loi, because by money it is Teichidei Dibur Dami, and you would listen to him. So that's how we understand that Gemara. Now let's apply this understanding to this discussion. Is the Ilah the Kinyan, or is the Ilah the Kiddushin? Is the cause the money, or is the cause the Kiddushin? From them is Araya as a Ilah Kinyan. From this Gemara and this Pshat of the Rashbam, it becomes a proof that the Ilah, that the cause is the Kinyan, is the money. Because if we would say that the cause is the Kiddushin, and it's through the Kiddushin that she acquires the money or the object, then we could have explained the Gemara more simply. As a the person wants to retract even the giving of the money. Nevertheless, we're not going to listen to him. Because since if we would say that the money comes through the Kiddushin is the cause, and the money is the effect, and as we just said, by Kiddushin you cannot retract. So automatically that would mean that he can't retract the money in this case, because the money in this case is coming as a result of the Kiddushin. So if the Kiddushin was the cause, then you would say that if the person retracted Teichidei Dibur, Shaimin Loi, even if he's retracted from the money, because the money is dependent on the Kiddushin, and the Kiddushin you can't retract, and therefore you can't retract the money either. Ain't Shaimin Loi. Since the Rashbam didn't learn that pshat in the Gemara, as we just said in the previous page, so there, and the Rashbam says that it's only in a case where she does keep the money, and it's only the kiddushin that he wants to retract. As the kiddushin haben sich auch mit aknas hakesef. But if you learn that the kiddushin begins with the money, and he would have been able to retract from the money like any other money acquisition. Therefore, the Rashbam has to learn that in this case he did not retract the money aspect. From kesef kiddushin of kesef matana is nitke chazarim bailas ala kesef, and changing that the money should become the money of a gift doesn't change in the ownership. The woman retains her ownership of the money, and therefore, in that aspect, it's teich kedei dibur is kedibur dami, and she keeps the money. Now, blaze from the kiddushin und the kesef level matana. It's only that he's retracting the kiddushin, and therefore, ein shaymin loy. We don't listen to him. So this is the raya that the Rogatchover brings, that ha'ilahu akinyin, that the money comes first, because if the kiddushin came first, then if the person had retracted, then the kiddushin can't be retracted, and therefore since the money is dependent on the kiddushin, then the money would also not be retracted. From the fact that the Rashbam says that the money could be retracted, it's just that the kiddushin can't be retracted, that has to mean that the money comes first, and therefore the money it could be retracted, but the kiddushin that comes after that cannot be retracted. So since the Rashbam learns it in this specific oifen, this specific way, this is a proof that ha'ilahu hakinyin, that the kinyin comes first. Now we're going to apply this to the two different limudim that we had, ki yikach and ein kesef. This is consistent with the different with the two limudim, the two psukim from which we learn that kesef is done through kiddushin. See from ki yikach, either from v'yatzachinim and kesef, how we learning it from ki yikach, or from the pasuk v'yatzachinim and kesef. In pasuk yikach ish isha is the adgash after pulas ish. The pasuk yikach ish isha, the emphasis on the action of the person, the man. Mashenki in ein kesef laden zav yes kesef laden nacher is the adgash after was the laden der was the kein bitte isha bekommt im kesef. The focus is on the recipient, the fact that she's receiving the money. So ki yikach ish is focusing on what the man is doing. Ein kesef is focusing on what the woman is doing, namely receiving the money, taking ownership of the money. Und der Rebbe learned up the kiddush kesef. Von ki yikach ish isha is mistaber to sagen, as the kiddushin tut sich auf durch der Paulas nesinas a kesef von dem Baal, ki yikach ish, und das the kiddushin peilt as the ishas located on the kesef. What creates the kiddushin? That's the action of the man. The man who's being mekadosh the isha, and because the man is being mekadosh the isha, therefore she is kind of the money. The kiddushin comes first. The giver, the noisen here, the husband here is the primary. Checking the limit for yes kesef lot nacher is mistaber as the nesinas a kesef on the Baal is nit genug as is varim mekudesh. Just the fact that he's giving, that he's being mekadosh is not enough. The kiddushin to zechuf davke durch dem was yes kesef bailus ala kesef. This is kain about kumtum kesef only after the woman takes ownership of the money. She receives the money. Only then can the kiddushin be fully activated, because the focus here is on the recipient, and therefore she has to have ownership of the money in order for the kiddushin. So if you learn it from yes kesef laden acher, then ha'ilahi hakinyin. It's the money that is the cause, and the kiddushin is what comes afterwards. So Adkan is the Nikla section of the Sikha. Very, very straightforward and geschmack. You have ki yikach and you have ein kesef. You have two approaches. You have that the ilah, the cause is the money, or the cause is the kiddushin. Now that you have ki yikach, where the focus is on the man, and therefore that would imply that the focus is the kiddushin, and through the kiddushin she acquires the money. And then when you say ein kesef, the focus is on the ownership of the money, on the receiving of the money by the woman, and only through that does the kiddushin happen. The kesef is the cause, and the kiddushin is the effect of that. Ad kan the nigla section of the sikha. Now we're going to go to the chassidus that's going to explain this entire concept in the relationship between the yid and the eibishter, which is like a marriage. All the issues, all the discussions in Nigla are drawn down from their counterparts in Pnimius HaTeira, in the secrets of Teira. Valderech says, and the same thing applies to our discussion. It is known the deeper meaning of the fact that a woman is acquired to by her husband, or is owned, given in ownership to her husband. That this refers to the kiddushin, to the betrothal and the union of the Eibishter and Yidden. This could be accomplished through three levels: through Kesef, Shtar, and Bia, which is discussed in other places in Chassidus. Shtar and Bia we're not going to discuss in the Sikha, we're going to discuss Kesef. Just like in a marriage between a husband and a wife in this world, there are two components. Number one, the issue is number one, the fact that she is exclusive to her husband. And the second aspect, the fact that she is now forbidden to the rest of the world. So too there are two components in the relationship, in the betrothal between the Yidden and the Eibishter. Number one, the dveikus from the Yidden with the Eibishter, the cleaving, the connection of a Yid to the Eibishter. Number two, to them to separate themselves, to remove themselves from anything that will be a distraction and a contradiction to connecting to Hashem. They're separating themselves from the worldly matters. They are sanctified and removed from desirable worldly matters. Just like in a marriage down below, these two things are connected, are intertwined. You can't separate the two. You can't, in the very same moment that she becomes exclusive automatically, at that same moment she becomes forbidden to the rest of the world. Similarly, so too is in the relationship, in the marriage between the Eibishter and Yidden, as a smooth and zayin beidin, that you must have both components. As the Chavos Alav said, it is impossible that it should settle within our hearts a love for the Eibishter together with a love of the world. These two things cannot be contained in the same heart. It's one or the other. You can't have a relationship with Hashem and at the same time have a relationship with the world. You have to first become prohibited to the world, or the world has to become prohibited to you, and that is only together with that comes the connection, the exclusivity with the Eibishter. Apia now. The Zayin move on the Tam Pnimi was the Minig Yisrael is to Mekadas and Dafke Mekinyan Kesef. In the beginning of the Sikha, the Rebbe said that everything is B'tachas Adiyuk, and therefore, since we find that the widespread custom is to use Kesef, we're going to see a connection between Kesef specifically and marriage. But now that we understand that marriage is a reflection of, or a metaphor to our relationship with the Eibishter, now we'll understand why the Minig Yisrael is that the Kiddushin is specifically with money or with something of monetary value. While the Inyan Pnimi from Kiddushin, the Yichud Udveikus von Itten mit Eibishter, the deeper layer of marriage, which is the oneness, the union, and the connection, the bond of the Eibishter with Yidden, is verbunden beikim mit der Bchine von Kesef, is connected primarily with the level of Kesef, Miloshen Nichsef Nichsafti, which comes from the words I yearn, I have this yearning, which is the Aveda von Ava. The marriage of a Yid with the Eibishter is based on love. Was ikir in Yarna is to uftan adi iskashos dvekus belakus, which the love that we have, its primary goal is to accomplish this bond and this connection with the Eibishter. The les pulchana kepulchana the nechimusa. There's no such avoda like the avoda of Ava. There's nothing else in the world that could bring us closer to the Eibishter than Ava, than love. Love of Hashem. Now we're going to apply this idea with the two approaches of the Ragachover. Is the cause the kinyan, the money, or is the cause the kiddush? First, we have to understand what is in this metaphor. What is the money and what is the kiddush? Based on this, we'll also understand the deeper understanding, the deeper message. In these two approaches, these two ideas, with regards to the money of Kiddushin, is the cause the money, or is the cause the Kiddushin. Was Elu Divelikim Chayim, both opinions of the words of the Eibishter, say Zayin Beided of B'pnimis Ha'inyanim, even though halachically we have to side with one over the other, but B'pnimis Ha'inyanim, they could both be applicable, at least B'pnimis Ha'inyanim, B'pnimis Ha'inyanim, they could both be applicable. The idea of the money, which we said before, that the word kesef comes from the words nichtef, nichsafti, which is the ahava, the love of a yid to the Eibishter. This represents the oneness and the cleaving, the connection of a yid with Hashem. On Kiddushin, and the Kiddushin, Miloshin Hafrasha V'Avdala, which Kiddushin comes from the word separation. This represents, after Prishus V'Ninyana Eilam, the separation from worldly matters. And this there's going to be two approaches. Welcher von sie ist die Ila und kommt früher? Which of the two is the cause that and has to come first? But thus is, do we say that first comes the love and then the removal of removing ourselves from the world, or first we remove ourselves from the world and then comes the love? First, thus is totally in the Eifen V'Seder Aveda, and which comes first is going to depend on what type of Aveda we are engaging in. See, das is bederech milmata l'mayla, but the other milmata l'mayla, are we starting from below and building our way upwards, or are we going lechatchila river to the above and then drawing it down into our lives? If you're going from starting from below and you're going upwards, is it in like kiddushin freer? Then kiddushin comes first. First and foremost, the yid has to remove himself, has to separate himself from the desires of the world. And when you remove yourself from the worldly matters, this can awaken within the person a desire to elokus, which is the kinyan kesef, which is the acquisition through money, which we said kesef is ava. First you walk away from the world, and then this brings you closer to love Hashem. Sur meiran derachvasei tev. This, like we're going to say in a moment, is the more orderly way of approaching it. First, sur meira, walk away, separate yourself from the world, and then you could become closer to Hashem. But if you're starting from above, then we work in the exact opposite way. After he awakens within himself a love for Hashem, which is the idea of the money, this can accomplish by the person. You should also experience kiddushin, the precious from Welt, the separation from the world. So these are the two ways. If you say the ilah is the kiddushin, that means you're starting by separating yourself from the world, and this brings you to connecting to Hashem. Or you could say that you're going milmayla lamata, that the kesef comes first, the kinyan comes first. You go straight to Abba to the Eibishter. And once you have an Abba to the Eibishter, this automatically makes you walk away from taivus of the world. And to understand these two approaches, we're going to see a few more differences, or we're going to spell it out a little bit better, the two differences. And I actually wrote up a shtickle chart bringing together both the Nigla aspect and the Chassidus aspect of the Sikha, and seeing the two columns, the two different approaches, if you say that the Ilah is the Kiddushin, or you say the Ilah is the Kinyan. Where does this come from, that you can either start from below and go upwards, or you can go straight to the above? The difference would be because there are two different types of Aveda. The first approach is a more orderly, systematic Aveda. This is the Aveda that is the more sensible, the logical way. Therefore, he cannot approach the love of Hashem before he separates himself from his love to the world. Let's say today, is the Aveda. Second approach is not a orderly, systematic way. The Aveda this supersedes the understanding of Seichel. As did that despite his situation, but he dedicates himself with total dedication to Elokus, which this originates from his Kabbalas Eil, his dedication to Hashem that supersedes logic. And through this, he becomes separated and removed from the desires and the temptations of this world. In other words, a person who is not ready for whatever reason to do this, the Aveda, he could Go lechatchila riber. He goes, he jumps, and he immerses himself in a love to the Eibishter, and this will bring him to remove himself from the world. This is also seen in the difference between the two limudim. The limud from Kikach Ish Isha, Parshas Kiddushin, and the limud from the Yatzachinim and Kasef, was Ratzach Vegin Anama Ivriya. In the limud of Kikach Ish Isha in our Parsha, which is in the discussion about marriage and divorce, but in this case, marriage, or V'yatzachinim and Kesef, where the primary discussion is about an Amma Ivriya, about a maidservant. And from there we learn to marriage. In Parshas Kiddushin, the Inyan Kiddushin is say that Derech HaRagil. In Parshas Kiddushin, where we're discussing marriages, is there say so? It's where it belongs, so to speak. Is there say that as Friya Darfan Zechuftan the Kiddushin? The order is that first you have to create the Kiddushin. You have to do prisha for Yana Elim to separate yourself from the world. Und nach Kesef, then you can reach the money. Avav Yichud Min Lakus, the love and union, oneness with Hashem. Take it in the Inyan Kiddushin in Parshas Amma Ivriya. But the Kiddushin that is discussed in the Parsha about the Amma Ivriya, about the maidservant, which is Avedas Eved, which is the Aveda of a servant, servitude. Was Bechlalas is the Aveda from Kabbalah's oil, the Mailim Mitamadas, which generally speaking, the Aveda of an Eved is Kabbalah's oil, dedication to his master, albeit above Tamvadas in this case, but it's Kabbalah's oil. In the Kiddushin, came in Tzukum into the Nesinu, Mesiru Tzelukus, noch Edem and Haut, Baprishas on Yana Elam. In this case, you could reach dedication to Hashem even before you get to separating yourself from the worldly matters. Bizas dem Gedel Mesiru Nesinu Tzelukus le'elukus. Shelamayla mitam vadas vete denach b'meila parish von Yana Ha'elam. It's because of his dedication to the Eibishter. It's because of this supralogical dedication to Hashem, that he wants to connect, he loves Hashem so much that automatically this removes him from Inyan Ha'elam. But this has to start with this Kabbalah's oil. It has to start with this approach, which is an Inyan of Avdus, which goes in the category of servitude, which is, therefore, this pasuk is in the Sukkim about Amma Ivriya, which is part of the Avedas Eved. We can see if Zion, we're going to go a level deeper. We're going to say that it's not just that here is this pasuk is in Kiddushin, in this parsha about Kiddushin, and this pasuk is about Amma Ivriya, and therefore there is an allusion to the idea of Avdus. As a matter of fact, we're going to connect it even stronger to the idea of Amma Ivriya of Avdus. That this is specifically connected to Amma Ivriya. In the matzif and the Eden was tuti Aveda. These two approaches in Aveda, that you can go you could start with love of Hashem, and that brings you automatically to removing yourself from Elam Hazeh, or the more orderly, systematic way where you start with removing yourself from the world, and that then you could bring yourself to loving Hashem and connecting with Hashem. This actually would depend on the state of the Yid who's doing this Aveda. Where is the Yid holding when he sets out to do this Aveda? As the priest one if a person's on a level that removing themselves from the taivus means literally, which means a person is still immersed in worldly matters, then is there say that al derech haragil. Then you have to follow the orderly way. A person can't reach the higher levels in Aveda to yichud udvekes b'Hashem durch Abba, to oneness and cleaving to Hashem through love. Before getting rid of the evil, the bad that's in the person. Therefore, you have to first have kiddushin, which is the separation from the world. Only then could you reach the money, the kesef, which is the oneness and the connection with Hashem. If a person is still literally engaged in taivus elam hazeh, how can you expect of him to reach yichud dvekes belakus, oneness with Hashem? So therefore, you have to start from the bottom up. First, you have to get rid of the taivus, and then you could deal with kesef. But if the person is on a higher level, which means he's already removed from literal taivis. And now the separation that we're demanding of him is a higher level of separation. To separate himself from his nature, from the nature of his midos, to dienen dem Eibishter, nicht leit die Medidis von dem sein Teva, to serve the Eibishter not in the parameters, not in the limitations of his nature, but to transform himself to serve the Eibishter outside of the limitations of his nature. How can you reach this level of precious, this level of separation, meaning to say this level of transformation? That's through Mechin de Gadlus. These Bananus Beimke Aleven Elokus, through the deep contemplation in godliness. But those Peota Zain Teva Hamidus on this Hapech werden von Zer Teva, which this causes that his nature should be transformed. Sheyia Chukele Elokus Bishinui Mimahus Chukase Lechemde Lemazeh Ubishapchus Hamidus. That his desire to Elokus should be totally different, should be a total transformation from his desire for Elam Hazeh. So in order to reach this level, you have to not just get rid of your taivis, but you have to transform yourself so that that the same way that originally you're the person that you were had taivis to Elam Hazeh. Now you've transformed yourself that now your chukis to Elokus. This is a total transformation. This is a totally different level than the Seder Avedim L'mata L'mayla. For this you need to go L'mayla L'mata. For this you need to go in a total transformative way. When the fire lernt ben up the Oifen Kedusha Kesef and Amo Ivriya Dafka, and that's why this Oifen, that the Kesef comes first, the Ava to the Eibishter comes first, the Kabbalah's oil. So the Ma'ila Mitam Vadas, and that leads to the Prishus, to the Kiddushin, is Lin Amo Ivriya. Well, the Darge from Amo Ivriya is Shini Amidis Mos. Because as explained in Chassidus and Derech Mitzvah Secha, the level of Amo Ivriya is the level of changing the Midas entirely to a totally new entity. Which is reflected in the avodah of the maidservant, literally. She takes raw grain and she turns it into something that's edible, into a delicacy. That's a shini mimos. If you're taking ready-made ingredients and you're mixing it together, so you're changing it, but it's not a shini mahusi. It's not a total transformation. When you take raw grain and you turn it into something that's a delicacy, this is a shini muslim hus. And that's the difference between an Amma Ivriya and an Eved Ivri, for example, which does a different avodah but doesn't transform it into a meichel, into matamim, into an edible delicacy. And since the Amma Ivriya is transformation, therefore from Amma Ivriya we learn the Oifen avodah that you start with Kesef, with Ava, and that leads to Prishus, because that is the Avodah of transformation. The person through his Baranus transforms himself, that he has this incredible Chukah Elokus, and through that he gets rid of his Taivis and his Teva Midosav, his Midas as his limitations. Even though we just said in the previous paragraphs that there's two types of people, but more specifically, every person contains both types of levels. Every person, even the person that still has taivus to Elam Hazeh, kipshut and literal taivus, nevertheless, he still has the ability within himself, the potential within himself to entirely give himself away to the Eibishter with total love and total dedication to Lakus. And this automatically will accomplish by him the separation from the desires and the temptation to Elam Hazeh, which means even though we said previously that it's two different types of people on two different levels, and therefore they have to take two different types of Aveda, but since every person really has everything concealed within them, so even the person that's on the lower level also has the ability to take the high road, to take the higher level, which means to start with giving themselves over entirely in love to the Eibishter, and this will change them that'll separate them from Taivas Elam Haza. Und durch dem wird Isha Niknis Lebaila, and through this the woman becomes acquired to her husband. Yichud und Veikus von Eden mit Nebishten, mit Tachlis HaYichud, the ultimate bond and the ultimate oneness of Yidden with Ebishter. With us is the Rinyan von Nisum, which is the idea of marriage. But with Zayin Bekar of Mamish, which is going to happen very, very speedily. Durch the Aveda von Eidus in his Banagolus, through the Aveda of being engaged to the Ebishter, which is the time of Golus. And very, very soon there's going to be the marriage, the Bias Mashiach Tzidkenu, and then we will experience the total Yichud Udvekus, the total oneness with the Eibishter, and the total love and the total removal of ourselves from Taivas Elam Haza. The Bias Mashiach Tzidkenu may be Bekar of Mamish.